There are many good uses for abstraction. The reason why we're such smart little creatures is because we can manipulate levels of abstraction and reality in many inventive ways. But in many cases, there is no need for that. So we have VR that has 6 degrees of freedom that allows us just not to abstract anymore and to bring something that's very, very close to the real thing that you can interact with in a way that's very, very close to how you would interact with physical reality to these other people. I thought I could not become a VR developer because having access to synthetic space and being able to generate synthetic space is going to change architecture. I later realized that it's going to change way more than just architecture. Because of VR, I believe we will leave behind us a conceptual approach to architecture that's about architecture as an object, as a big fancy sculpture like a spaceship that just landed in the city, which is how we plan museums and fancy buildings today. And we move towards architecture as a spatial experience, as a story, as a narrative in space. What it is at its heart, it's a cognitive manipulation machine. The reason each of us is able to do the things that we do and that we've been describing here is because we're manipulating the sensorial input output of the person. So what in our lives is about a cognitive process? Well, everything. Who we are, the way we think, intrapersonal relationships. So it just covers everything. And I think it's important to correctly label VR like this, to just label it for what it is. Physical reality is just going to be one of the many types of realities and many types of experience that we're going to live across. So my utopian version is a world in which we are cognitively able to switch between multiple realities without negative side effects. We're going to deal with a multitude of agents and agencies. So we are going to be there as entities, but we are going to live there together with AI entities of many different kinds. And we are going to be experimenting as human entities with forms of agency that are much brighter than the forms of agency that we have now. So AI is going to play two roles in these non-physical worlds. One, they're going to augment our agents, and two, they're going to be agents like us. I feel just so blessed to live at a time where humanity has invented synthetic immersive space. We've never had that before. So as architects, to design at one-to-one scale, it's just holy shit, this is going to change everything. Our thoughts and behaviors are controlled by the environment and by the interactions around us. It's interaction with objects, with bigger environments, and with other people. So it kind of goes without saying that when you alter these environments and these interactions and all of this, you can alter people's thoughts and behaviors. And we are seeing researchers in the medical field finding ways to use exactly this mechanism to solve certain cognitive problems people are having. VR will help people expand their definition of themselves. And one of the things that for me comes under question when I'm in VR is age. Gender is another thing that comes into question immediately in VR, and the whole notion of identity. But what I'm seeing in my own use of VR is that after a while, these questions are not even so relevant anymore. So in the beginning, you feel like I have to find answers. You have to figure it out. But if you persevere, you will overcome that initial need. And then you will get to the point where you just enjoy being a more sophisticated and plural being than maybe you thought you were. And my wish is that more and more people will come to have this kind of experience this type of personal expansion through this technology, and that most of us will be able to do that without paying a very high cognitive cost. Whenever I'm in London, I go to the British Museum. Like all museums of this kind, it is an astonishing exhibition of how things change. What kind of things? Things like who human beings are, but also what we are. A second dangerous concept we've been living by, that we rational beings have a subject-object relationship to the world. In other words, that the mind is in the brain. This is very much connected to my point earlier. This way of thinking conveniently separates us from the environment. That is something external to us that we control. Most of modern life actually consists of sitting in a chair for 8 hours a day at best, doing what we call thinking. But this way of conceiving of what we are, what we do, and how we do it has at last gotten an inventory number, and it's going behind the glass at the British Museum. For us, this is a paradigmatic shift from an architectural object that is passive and dead in its cold abstraction to spaces that reflect a dynamic relationship with the thinking process of human beings. And the first step in getting there is to start building tools that could get us there. There are developers like myself that are very interested in pushing those boundaries and exploring that. So I don't have an interest in creating VR experience where we are embodying like homomorphic things like here. I want to help people transform into other things. There's very fresh data coming in proving that whenever we are doing things that drastically depart from what we would do in physical reality and in our humanoid bodies, there's this big changes happening in the brain. It's exactly this thing that make VR amazing. You have the feeling, oh, I can fly in VR. That just feels so new and so wonderful. Well, that observation, it feels so new. That implies a change at the neural level. So we need to stop taking these things for granted and say, okay, we're gonna get mesmerized by these amazing new powers we have in VR, but that comes with, I don't want to call it a cost, but that implies very serious things. So it's not just about let's deal with privacy and then we can play in here and do whatever we want. That playing in here and that freedom has even further implications that we haven't even started to deal with. I believe this technology is a sign of an epistemic change from Cartesian rationality to embodied rationality. Our ability to think, quote unquote, rationally, so to abstract the world and manipulate abstract concepts, has made our species extremely successful. I mean, the last few centuries have been quite a blast. We've been able to exert control over nature and extract whatever we needed or wanted out of that with phenomenal efficiency. However, in the past 20 years, notions of embodied cognition have really taken off because they've started to be vetted by novel methods of research coming out of neuroscience. So it turns out that we actually think through our body and we think in movement quite literally. It's interesting to note that the mechanism that gives many traditional systems and structures of power, well, their power, is their ability to control the body. None of that is going anywhere. We still have physical bodies, and I believe we always will, but we are dealing with a much more pluralistic and sophisticated definition of what a body is. It's interesting to think about what are the new power dynamics and control dynamics that might be emerging out of this redefinition. The space has to be able to gently control and choreograph and house that human activity. So it's not supposed to hinder it, it's supposed to promote it, but that implies a very clear understanding of that human activity. So when I take these things to VR, I run into a lot of unanswered questions that are actually very interesting.
who are we designing for in VR? Like, who are we in VR? There is no clear answer for me to this question. I think we are slightly different kind of creatures in VR than in physical reality. I think in time we're going to develop thinking patterns and cognitive pathways that are going to be distinct for virtual worlds that we do not use in physical reality. It's not clear to me what the virtual body is. The virtual body could be anything. The designer of that virtual world has control over our entire perception, which does not happen with social media, no matter how powerful it is at this point. When you go into VR, if I design that application, I control what you see. I control your eyes. Yes. I can like touch a slider in my game engine and you're gonna see like a fly. All of a sudden, your quote unquote human vision is gone.
When Peter Eisenman said there are two buildings, there's the one I design and then there's the one I walk into, there's a corollary to that. That implies that not just that there are two buildings, it also implies that there's two yous. Mm-hmm. There's the rational you that designs things either with the power of the pencil from a all-powerful, like omnipotent kind of being.
Right. And
then there's the phenomenal you who feels things. And there are many examples of ways in which we cannot coherently bridge the two things, the things we feel and the things we think. Many works of art like Richard Serra are predicated on exploring this disjunction. Mm. It's a much more central part of our lives, but the culture that we live in has gotten very proficient at ironing out and hiding any kind of inconsistency between the thinking you and the feeling and experiential you. So there are the two buildings. Flip that, there are the two yous. And what we think VR can do is allow both of these me's, these two types of designers that they reside in my person, to start to contribute to the design process. And we're developing a methodology about that has to do with switching between one role and the other. And it's not as simple as saying we're switching the medium. Mm. It's way more profound than that. You're actually switching the cognitive pathway that you're using to make a decision. When I am in my own VR applications and tests, I don't like to be embodied in a humanoid form. So I prefer non-humanoid forms, and I sometimes prefer to have to switch my views, like to have some kind of like omnipresence, or I put cameras in different corners of the room, and I switch, like click, 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 and I switch from different corners of the room. So not only am I not humanoid, but I'm having my sensory input and my powers and my relationship to the space, and being able to in one click see things from there and then see things from over there. It makes me feel sometimes like my whole body is the room, right? Like I am the room. I am the space. For me, the most interesting topic is not so much what's happening with AI and if it's going to hit singularity or not and when. It's what's happening with us. How are we changing as we are going through this journey? And if we do hit singularity, I don't care so much about the actual thing, whatever it ends up being. I actually care about what are we going to become? How is that going to influence us? And I'm seeing so much potential for change in terms of this virtual world that have to do with having people question things that they've never questioned before. So I've never questioned the extent of my body before VR. I never thought I would come to say I feel like I'm a building. If someone had told me these things a few years ago, I would have said you are hallucinating. I have no idea what you're talking about. And yet here I am discussing these things with you. So for me, that's such a profound change in what in philosophy is referred to as subjectivity. So subjectivity is, how does it feel to be me? How does it feel to be you? And normally these things are actually politically influenced, right? Like an entire government will make a program that sells you on being an American or being an Italian or being a German, and this is all to kind of push people towards certain, how does it feel to be me? Well, I am American, I am a woman, I am like these fixed identities that you're being placed into. And yet we come in here and I'm like, well, darn, I am maybe not American, not German, not Romanian, not a woman, maybe I'm this wall here. And that just turns everything upside down on such a profound level. I believe we're about to witness a rapid transformation of subjectivity at scale. Subjectivity is how it feels to be you, how it feels to be human. So this always changes. How it feels to be us modern people today is not how it probably felt to be a person 1,000 years ago. Also, how it feels to be me is likely not the same thing as how it feels to be you. But what I believe this technology will bring about is a change in subjectivity at a pace that is noticeable. And I'm not sure we've lived to anything similar in the past ever.